I'm not supposed to be talking about this. I know that. Every rule in the book, every ethics mandate, every warning label they slapped on my mandatory leave paperwork screams silence. Honestly, I'm probably not supposed to be talking at all. They took my badge yesterday, my shield, 20 years of my life condensed into a 7-pointed star of polished metal, and they slid it across the cold laminate table. They handled it like they were handling something radioactive, or maybe something recently scraped from a crime scene, something toxic. There was no shouting, no theatrical threats from the captain, just this look, this clinical, sad, calculating look, like they were waiting for the inevitable crack, waiting for me to snap the way a cheap ceramic plate finally breaks under too much pressure. And maybe they weren't wrong to worry. Vance, my lieutenant, or maybe he's just a lieutenant now, I don't know who I report to, he told me I'm on mandatory psych evaluation. He didn't say I was dangerous. He didn't have to. You can always tell when someone thinks you're a monster, or at least teetering on the edge of becoming one. They keep one hand under the table, casually resting, but you know they're ready to grab something sharp or dial 911 on their secure line. They don't trust the stability of the chair you're sitting in. I didn't start recording this for strangers on the internet or for some morbid podcast audience hungry for grisly details. I started this because I needed a witness. I needed a record that wasn't tainted by the missing time, the fabricated evidence, or the consensus that Mark Sterling just finally lost his damn mind. I'm talking to you now the same way I'd talk to someone sitting across from me in the corner booth of an all-night diner at 3 a.m, tired eyes, empty cup, listening, not because they're curious, but because they don't know what else to do, and maybe, just maybe, they've seen a ghost too. What I'm about to tell you, it ruined my life. It excavated 20 years of careful living, of duty, of sleepless nights, and leveled it all in 7 days. And it all started last Tuesday. It was one of those graveyard shifts where the city feels hollowed out, drained, the kind of night where the ambient noise drops out and the wind whistles through broken fences and shattered windows, a sound like the city itself is sighing, giving up. The streetlights flicker just enough to play tricks on your peripheral vision, making you think someone's walking beside your patrol car, keeping pace, always just out of sight. We got a call, 1054, possible body, Apex Tenements. If you live in North March, you already know the place, the Apex, condemned building, red line district. It's not just a collection of busted drywall and exposed wiring. It's a graveyard, a monument to broken families and bad decisions. The city pretends it's abandoned. It's been slated for demolition for a decade. But everyone knows people still crawl into those rooms looking for shelter or a brief, cheap high, or sometimes just a quiet place to finally die. The dispatch tone was flat, almost bored, routine. But the second we stepped out of the cruiser, I felt it. Something tighten around my ribs, a pressure. Like the air wasn't just cold, it was too thick, too heavy, like breathing through wet gauze. My partner, Jenkins, a good man, 28, solid career ahead of him, he cracked a joke about the smell. "Tastes like failure, Sterling," he muttered, pulling his scarf higher over his face. But even Jenkins sounded nervous. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by a strained tenor. We went through the main door, or what used to be a door. It was just a hinge and a gap now. The lobby was stripped bare. Copper thieves had taken everything. We moved toward the concrete stairs. The air here was dead still. No breeze, no outside noise, just our boots crunching on plaster dust and broken glass. Halfway up the second flight, the smell changed. It shifted. The underlying funk of mold and piss and stagnant water was overlaid with something metallic and sweet, something unmistakable. You never forget that blend of iron and rot. You feel it in your throat before you even recognize it cognitively. It's the smell of fresh catastrophe. Apartment 4B. The door was ajar, a single dark rectangle of shadow in the already overwhelming darkness of the hallway. Inside, everything felt wrong. You know when a room feels like it's waiting for something? Like a stage set where the actors just walked off, leaving the tension hanging in the spotlights. The air hadn't moved in hours, maybe days. There was one piece of furniture standing upright in the middle of the room, a cheap wooden kitchen chair, and one person in that chair, back facing us. At first glance, it was a routine gang hit, sad, brutal, but frighteningly familiar, execution style, bullet to the back of the head, clean. I did what I always do. It's muscle memory. I pulled out my notebook, logged the basics, temperature of the room, the way the light fell, liver pattern, just starting to fix, suggesting a time of death maybe an hour or two before the call. Blood pooling beneath the chair, already darkening, congealing. I took a deep breath, fighting the metallic tang in the air, and moved to check the victim's face. Standard procedure, positive ID. But right before I stepped around the chair, something inside me whispered. It was sharp, clear, and absolutely terrifying. It said, "Don't look." I ignored it. I'm a professional. I came around to the front, and I looked straight into the face of a dead man who wasn't a stranger. It was me. I didn't just resemble him. This wasn't a case of striking similarity. It was me. I stared at the face frozen in that last vacant expression. The details were too specific to be coincidence. The exact same scar on the chin, a thin crescent from when I flipped a bike at 7 years old and landed on a broken curb. The same crooked nose from a bar fight during my academy year, a stupid, avoidable brawl over a spilled beer. Hell, even the chipped front tooth I'd sworn to fix 10 years ago but never got around to. That dead body was still warm, and it was mine. Jenkins yelled from the hallway, his voice unnaturally loud in the silence. "Sterling, everything okay in there? It's tight." I panicked, a visceral, chemical surge of absolute terror. If he saw the body, nothing would ever be the same. Not for me, and maybe not for him. My first thought wasn't duty. It wasn't evidence. It was preservation, self-preservation. I grabbed the corner of a heavy, oil-stained plastic tarp lying nearby, probably used by the vagrants, and I yanked it fast, covering the corpse before Jenkins could walk into the line of sight. "It's a textbook execution, Jenks," I called back, my voice gravelly. I had to clear my throat. "Vic's ID looks clear. Looks like a John Doe, mid-40s. Back of the head. Let's call it in, lock down the perimeter, and wait for CSI." I know how that sounds. I know I broke every rule in the book. Tampering, hiding, lying. But fear isn't logical. Fear doesn't file reports. It just acts to survive. With Jenkins out of the room, radioing dispatch, I forced myself to get closer to the body again. I had to know. Was this an elaborate, cruel joke? A twin I didn't know about? I checked the pockets of the corpse. I don't even know why. Maybe I wanted proof this was just a mannequin, a prop, anything but reality. In the breast pocket of a cheap, worn bomber jacket, I found a crumpled piece of paper. A diner receipt. Red Line Diner. Timestamp 2:30 a.m. Half an hour before the 10:54 call came in. Here is the problem. The first solid piece of evidence against the reality I knew. At 2:30 a.m., I was in my patrol car 5 miles away, doing paperwork. I even radioed dispatch at 2:33 a.m. to log my change of sector. There's a timestamp on my radio log, a clear record. But the receipt had the server ID of a waitress named Sarah, a woman who knows my order by heart. She knows I always order the all-day breakfast. She knows how I take my coffee, black, industrial strength. She jokes that I never finish my hash browns. Someone who looked exactly like me was sitting in that diner, ordering my meal, using my habits, while I was across town, doing my job. When we finished clearing the scene, I managed to smuggle the receipt into my own pocket instead of the evidence bag, a calculated risk, a line crossed. I didn't tell Jenkins. I didn't tell anyone. I took the case file home. I told my captain I wanted to head the investigation, citing my long-standing knowledge of the Red Line district. He bought it. He bought it because I'm Mark Sterling, the reliable cop, the one who doesn't screw up. I told myself I'd figure out what the hell happened. This had to be a deep-fake scenario, some elaborate, sick plot. A clone, a twin, anything but what my eyes were telling me. But that's when the gaps started, the mental erosion. It began subtly, insidious. I'd be microwaving leftovers at 11 p.m., focused on the spinning plate. I'd blink, maybe yawn, and suddenly the timer would read 0, even though the food was still stone cold. A jump of maybe 30 seconds, but palpable. Then it got worse. I'd look at the clock and it'd be 8 p.m. I'd be reading the file. Blink. Midnight. I lost 4 hours, 3 nights in a row. I initially convinced myself it was stress, fatigue, the kind of trauma that manifests as temporary blackout. But the next morning, Wednesday, I checked my off-duty gun. It stays locked in a basement safe, serial number logged. The safe was locked, combination untouched, but the gun was freshly cleaned, smelling sharply of Hoppy's No. 9 solvent, which means it had been recently disassembled, thoroughly wiped down and reassembled, which means it had been fired. And there was mud, red clay mud, caked deep into the treads of a pair of heavy hiking boots I never wear, boots that were supposedly stored in a plastic bin in the garage. The red clay kind of mud you only find behind the apex tenements, that specific shade of deep, rusty earth. I convinced myself I was sleepwalking, high stress, exhaustion, a form of fugue state. But the holes in my memory kept getting bigger. Time didn't just go missing. There were moments where I remembered doing things I never did, flashes, like short scenes from a movie. I'd remember arguing with a neighbor I'd never spoken to. I'd remember the weight of a toolbox in my hand, fixing a leaky faucet that wasn't leaking. Flashes from a life that wasn't mine, but still felt terrifyingly familiar, like my brain was receiving a broadcast from a parallel station. The psychological stress was beginning to wear away the edges of my professionalism. I started seeing myself in reflections that looked a half second out of sync. Passing a store window, I'd catch a glimpse of the man who looked like me turning his head a fraction of a second before I did. I'd hear footsteps behind me that matched mine too perfectly. The rhythm, the slight drag on the right heel from an old football injury. At the corner store, the cashier, a young kid named Manny, stopped me. He peered at me confused. "Detective Sterling, you back again? Thought you just left. You buy 2 packs of smokes this morning, man?" I hadn't been there in days. I quit smoking 2 years ago. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, waved at me Thursday morning as I left for the precinct. She held up her coffee mug. "Sleep well, Mark? You were outside pacing the yard at 3 a.m. Looked like you were practicing a monologue." I was asleep at 3 a.m. or at least I thought I was. Every path led back to one impossible, terrifying conclusion. Someone wasn't just pretending to be me. Someone was living as me. Someone who shared my memories, my habits, my scars. Someone who knew my safe combination, my preferred scent of gun oil, and my exact route to the diner. Someone who wanted to replace me, and maybe someone who had already succeeded in murdering the first version of me. I had to prove I wasn't losing it. I had to prove it wasn't all just the onset of a devastating psychosis. I set up cameras in my house, 5 of them, cheap surveillance cameras, hidden in lamps, in books, behind paintings, motion activated, covering every approach to my safe and my bedroom. The next morning, every single one of them was turned face down, perfectly, deliberately aimed at the floor. No recordings, no footage, but the house smelled faintly like gun oil, that solvent scent, and there was a new small dent on the floorboard near my bed. I started finding leftovers in my fridge I never bought, spicy takeout, receipts from places I hadn't visited, a cheap liquor store 3 districts away, conversations I didn't remember having logged on my phone's call history. Jenkins noticed, of course. He's too good a partner not to. "You sleepin', Mark?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "You drinkin' again?" he asked, the real concern in his voice like a physical weight. Then, softly, painfully, "You seeing things?" I didn't know how to answer. How do you tell your partner that you found your own body and now your replacement is using your house? On Friday, everything snapped into a terrifying, high-definition focus. I decided to confront whatever was happening. I didn't care if it was a twin, a doppelganger, or a genuine supernatural possession. I was going to find the seams of this lie. I stayed awake for 36 hours straight. No sleep, no blinking long enough to drift. Just coffee, energy drinks, fear, and breathing way too fast. My nerves were screaming. I sat in my living room, my off-duty in my lap, staring at the front door. But at some point, sometime between the 36th and 38th hour, I blacked out anyway. Just a sudden, total void, like a plug being pulled on a life support machine. When I came to, it wasn't in the living room. I was in my car. The engine was running. I was parked outside a familiar residential street, idling under a sputtering street lamp. My off-duty gun was in the passenger seat, and there was fresh, terrible mud, the red clay mud on the floor mat. I checked the gas gauge. The tank was half empty. I had driven somewhere. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Jenkins, all within the last hour. 1 voicemail. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. When I played the voicemail, Jenkins sounded terrified, not just worried, but genuinely, sickeningly terrified. He whispered my name like he wasn't sure he should be calling me at all. He said, his voice cracking, "Mark, I saw you outside my house about an hour ago. You didn't look right. You just stood there staring at the window. You didn't move. You just stared. Call me back, man, please." I wasn't outside Jenkins' house. At least, I don't think I was. The red clay on the floor mat said otherwise. That night, I went back to Apex Tenements. I had to. I had to see the body again, touch the tarp, prove to myself I wasn't imagining everything, prove that the police report I filed was real. But when I got to 4B, the room was empty. No tarp, no body, no blood, not even the dark, sticky stain of congealed blood, not even drag marks on the dusty floor. It looked sterile. It looked like no one had been in that apartment in years. just an empty, broken-down room. When I went to the precinct the next morning, Saturday, the case file wasn't just gone from my desk, it wasn't in the system. The original call log had no record of a 10:54 that night. The dispatch audio was missing. The captain claimed we were never even sent to Apex. It was scrubbed, erased. Jenkins refused to talk to me. He looked scared, avoided eye contact. He walked away from me in the hallway like I was contagious, like I carried a sickness. But here's the part that keeps me awake. The truth that burns through the denial and the panic. When I tried to confront him one last time, cornering him near the lockers, he pulled his sleeve down in a panic, fast, like he was hiding a scar. And I realized why. There were bruises on his wrist, dark, deep violet marks, finger marks, like someone had grabbed him, held him tightly. Finger marks, the perfect size and span of my own hand. The more I dig, the more I realize something inside me is waking up when I'm not conscious. Something that hates me, something that wants my life, not just my identity. Something that already has access to everything I am and everything I was supposed to be. I'm the detective on a murder investigation where I'm the victim, and all evidence still points to me as the killer. The psych eval is in the morning. I'm scheduled for 9 a.m. I know what they'll say. They'll diagnose, they'll medicate, they'll lock me away in a quiet, padded room, away from my safe and my clean gun. But they didn't see the corpse staring back at me with my eyes. They didn't see how frighteningly alive it looked, even in death. They didn't see how its eyes seemed to follow me when I walked away. I'm out of time. I can't sleep, because if I do, whatever is inside me will take over again, and I don't think I'll wake up next time. I think I'll be the one in the car, smelling the solvent, checking my phone for the next victim. If I disappear, or if something happens to Jenkins, or if they find another body that looks like me, look in the basement of the Apex tenements. Not the first basement, not the storage rooms, the sub-basement, the floor underneath the floor, behind the boiler room, the old furnace pit. That's where this thing is nesting. That's where it's hiding the evidence it can't erase. That's where the next body is going to be. And I'm terrified it's going to be Jenkins. Or mine. Or both.